it's a bit scary, right? I mean, we're about to lose the concept of shared experience, right? My browsing experience, which will be integrated with prompts and my own inputs, will look vastly different than I mean, we could go to the exact same website, right? And what is generated for me will be vastly different than what is generated for you. We won't even see the same movie, right? My prompt, I'll be Princess Leia in like a, I don't know, apocalyptic Star Wars, and and shared experience, right, is going to become exceptionally scarce.
If you've been watching the short-term rental world lately, you've seen the same playbook on repeat. Add the slide, add the hot tub, paint it black, do a mural, call it luxury, and let the data decide the rest. But what happens when the data is wrong? Today's guests are two women building a very different future. Janice Wilson is a destination design strategist and the founder of Menizei, a forest retreat near Olympic National Park that's quietly outperforming its entire region. She builds agentic AI systems by day and refuses to let data become the North Star in how places are designed. And Paula Oblen is an experiential designer and entrepreneur who spent 20 plus years turning spaces into brands, most famously reimagining Casa Tierra with Bobby Berk, who you might know from Queer Eye, into a world-class story-driven destination. This episode is about the new advantage in hospitality: identity, conviction, and category of one stays that can't be replicated. Because in the age of AI, sameness is cheap, and unforgettable, it's maybe the only moat left. All right, friends, without further ado, get ready to meet Janice and Paula. Paula, Janice, welcome to Behind the Stays. It is such an honor to have you both on the show today.
Thrilled to be here, Zach. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zach. So wonderful to be here. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, I know, actually, Janice, we got connected because you've been listening to the pod for a while and reached out and you shared your incredible property, Menizei, with me, and was just totally blown away. I'm fortunate enough to have so many friends kind of building unique stays, building experiential hospitality projects. But when I saw your project, I was just genuinely overwhelmed. I haven't been yet, and we're going to change that soon.
We're going to make that happen.
We're
going to make that happen.
But ever since you reached out, I've been a huge fan of your work. And then you reached out, introduced me to Paula. You guys have some exciting partnerships that you're working on together. So I'm super excited for this conversation. You both are storied creatives in your own right, real Renaissance women, if I may say so. You've dabbled in so many different sectors. Janice, law. You're an engineer by trade as well. Now you're an entrepreneur. You're working at one of the most exciting AI companies in the world today. Paula, you have a storied career in real estate and design. And so I'm so excited because I want to hear what you guys are working on together. But I also want to unpack a little bit of your personal stories, just to give the audience tuning into this conversation a little bit of context as to why they should be paying attention to what you have to say and your respective perspectives. So we're going to do that. We've got a lot on the docket to try to get through today. So I'm going to try to be as tight and concise as possible, while also ensuring we have plenty of time to hear how you think and why you think that way. So I actually want to start with just a fun question. We'll start with you, Janice, here. What's something that you've been just thinking about lately? This could be a hobby you're thinking of, you've been thinking about exploring. This could be a concept, an AI workflow that you've been obsessing over. But what's something that's consumed a lot of your mental energy as of late?
He so called me out, Zach. I wish I had something sexy, but yeah, pretty much just working on agentic workflows. Basically trying to automate the entire administrative workload that is Menizei.
Do you have a quick follow-up on that? I think I'm not technical by trade. I have become a obsessive vibe coder. as of late, and it's been fascinating on so many levels. One of the things I questions I have, especially for like true creatives, which I consider you one, Janice, is do you, does removing some of the creative process from the flow, does doing it 100% yourself as you might have 6 months, 12 months ago, do you lose a part of yourself? Do you lose some of the passion and the soul for the project, or do you still get that creative hit, so to speak, but just in another format?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely nod to the AI apocalypse that is upon us. I do not believe that agents are yet in the position to take over the creative piece.
Mm,
Not when it's true Genesis. So I very rarely use, I might use an agent, right, as like a jam session buddy, but I rarely use AI for the actual strategy, especially
mm,
when it comes to destination design.
mm.
But the beauty, right, of agentic workflows is that, for example, the administration heft, with that lighten, that gives you more time to get into that creative space, and so that piece of it I love.
Before we go to you, Paula,
Yeah.
Janice, just give us the quick overview, the skinny, so to speak,
Hmm.
on Menizei. Where did the idea for the project come from? What is Menizei for those who aren't familiar with the project? Give us kind of the quick overview of your first hospitality concept that you've brought to life.
First of all, Zach, well done on the pronunciation.
Ding, ding, ding.
I think I called
Nailed
it like
it.
Menizei or something, or Menizei or something when we first chatted, but so I knew going in.
Uh, yeah, Menazai is all about forest cocooning. It is this combination of Shinrin Yoku, attention restoration theory, and relational science. And Menazai is sort of the expression of what forest cocooning is. My husband and I, we love dispersed camping. We love getting remote. We love being like immersed in nature. But it's a pain in the ass, right? To pack in and pack out. It takes a lot of work to get to the good stuff. And then we kind of tried the other end of the spectrum of like, the typical glamp ground.
Mm,
And that sucked. The land was completely shorn. You walk out of your tent in the morning and you see white canvas. There's kids running around. It's noisy, and so Menazai for us was the sweet spot. It was the our ideal, our dream base camp. So yeah, that is the origin story of Menazai.
and where is Menizei for the listeners?
Menazai is just 15 minutes north of Olympic National Park in Washington State.
Beautiful area. The
Yeah.
the content that you post on social, it feels AI generated, quite frankly, because it's so beautiful. It's so cinematic. I think that's probably the best descriptor for it is the site itself, the designs, right, of the actual tents that you guys have put together, the bathhouse, right. I mean, it is truly cinematic.
Thank you.
In the truest
Thank
sense of the
you.
word, which is so hard to execute on. So when you see those things, you just got to give credit where credit's due, because a lot of folks claim to be that. It's
Yeah.
really hard to be that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. No, it was great to be part of Journey's coming out party. I'm so glad that you all took us into your fold. And it's been a beautiful thing.
Well, Paula, I want to go to you. So first off, what's just something that's been on your mind? Are you thinking of agentic workflows day in and day out? What's been top of mind for you?
Yes, maybe not quite to the extent of Janice, because of course her, vast experience in so many other areas, and our new collaborative work together has been so wonderful. Kind of pointing to that too. I would say that's on my mind. Of course, AI is a big piece on my mind. We are in the middle. I would say more recently, there's a tons of balls in the air for us, which is typical, but lately it's been even more than normal. And we are in the middle of a little bit of a refresh on our brand. And I've always, had this vision behind. We were, when we kind of say pioneers, I kind of feel like I'm like, wow, how old am I? Am I a pioneer? Um, but when we talk about, what we're working on in design and the immersive things and the hospitality led destinations, we, have been having these feelings for so long. I mean, 2010 was when we trademarked our company, Hotelements. And so, in just going forward to where we are now, what's been on my mind is to really wrap all of these visions now that this is no longer an immersive, or not an immersive, but an emerging category of
Mm.
design. It really has landed. The bar has been raised in the short-term rental luxury vacation space. And so I have really been feeling that our what we see, the public needs to see the real deep kind of immersive feeling that we have around this business, and we are bringing a lifestyle component into that. So that's really been on my mind. It's daunting, as you know, those things can be, but I'm really, really excited to get it out into the world, hopefully within the next, say, 30 to 60 days. So
Well, we're all excited. How did you guys meet? You guys have had your own, careers, very impressive in their own right. But how and why did you guys decide to collaborate in this format?
yeah, Janice, do you want to? I'll
You,
lead off and you can chime in.
yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Beautiful, beautiful little marriage. I became involved in the Vacation Rental Design Summit when they launched 3 years ago, and this is a organization led by Jessica Deuce, Jane Dagme, who is very heavily involved in High Point by Design and High Point Market. And I was 2023, I guess 22, 23, when they kicked off. I was a speaker and did not meet Janice that year. The next year, she attended and gave an amazing presentation, of course, on Menizei. And so I am on their board as well. So I'm heavily involved with the Vacation Rental Designers Collective and the Summit. And anyway, that's really where we met. We were both speakers at that summit in North Carolina. Yeah.
Yeah, we
Sounds like a
didn't
match made in heaven.
really say it again.
I was just saying, it sounds like a match made in heaven. But yeah, Janice, what's your
Yeah.
side of the story?
Yeah, no, for me, it was love at first sight. There were several speakers at that summit. I did not gel with the design aesthetic of all the speakers, but I saw Paula's aesthetic and I was like, okay, this feels like home. And we didn't actually talk
A
much
lot.
that year, but we were thrown into an email thread where we were asked to talk about wellness, and as we were going back and forth, we just realized like we had a lot of philosophies in common.
Mm.
And yeah, that thread quickly whittled down to just me and Paula.
Yeah.
And yeah, we kept jamming, and then finally we were like, let's spread the gospel of what it takes to design a destination.
I love this work that you all are doing because there are so many design philosophies out there when it comes to vacation rentals. There's
Mhm.
I'll just call it, because I consider myself one of these, so I mean this affectionately, but like there's like the tech bro, right? Design philosophy of like put a slide and like a bunch of neon colors and you know faux
Yeah.
grass in the
Yeah.
yard,
We
right?
are
And
familiar,
you
Zach.
know
We
the type,
are.
right? I have mad respect for many of my friends who are building these sorts of businesses, right?
Yeah.
Not at all my design aesthetic, not at all where I want to be, not at all where anyone that I know wants to be. But hey, in theory, according to
Yeah.
their LinkedIn and Twitter posts, like they're doing pretty well. Who knows? But point being, I love that you all are in this space helping craft and carve the perspective that you are, because it's a dynamic space. It's a huge space. Multiple design strategies, multiple design ethos can and do work, but I think we're often overwhelmed with the here's how to make your Airbnb, the most valuable real estate asset you've ever owned, right? Put it in a
Mhm.
slide and put in a pool table and paint the walls blue and orange, right? And like, I think from from an investor's perspective, right? Touting these returns again on social, it can look, if it's a totally unemotional investment, it can seem like, okay, well, this is what people want. Let's just do this thing. But what I love about your all's respective projects, and Menizei, I think, is a case study in and of itself here, right? In
So,
terms of the returns that you're seeing, Janice, in terms of the occupancy that you're seeing with this initial project. Janice, or excuse me, Paula, your various projects that you've worked on are also testaments to this, and we'll talk about those in a minute here. But I appreciate that you all are bringing a voice and a perspective here of, hey, there are other ways where you can still have incredible, thoughtful aesthetic and experience without it being tacky, and it can still perform well as an
yes.
investment.
Yes.
And we would argue perform better.
Better.
There you go. I would argue and agree with you all there as well. Paula, I do want to go to you here. You've spent more than a couple decades building businesses in this space. You've worked alongside celebrity creatives, restaurateurs, real estate investors. And you were doing this work long before design forward short-term rentals was like
Yeah.
a thing someone was talking about before the summit, right? Was
Oh,
even a
yeah.
thing.
Exactly.
I want to hear, your
Mhm.
perspective on, if you're consulting with an entrepreneur today who's building a hospitality asset, how
Mhm.
do you advise them
Mhm.
on deciding between doing something like Janice did with Menizei, which is like this true, like, one of one nature immersed experience, versus curating a beautiful, maybe traditional, so to speak, vacation home in like a destination like San Diego? How do you help folks think through where they should invest when it comes to this experiential design led hospitality?
Absolutely. And it's so wonderful to be having these conversations. I have to pinch myself because I have been yearning for these conversations, which is why Janice and I are, heavily linked now forever. I think what is important to kind of also say, and to set the stage on this, is that if you're looking at, aesthetic and identity, right? One of the biggest challenges that everyone puts aesthetics before identity,
Mm,
right? And or and beautiful and unique, right? And looking at those sometimes as, are those opposing forces, right? I see them as beautiful and even wildly unique. I see them more as incomplete without identity.
mm,
And I think that is what's been missing in this business, and how we really look at this immersive design differently. A space can be beautiful, it can be styled perfectly, it can be photogenic, and it can still be forgettable, right? And so I believe that as we look forward into these projects, like you were asking about, if I were consulting with an entrepreneur, is that we really have to look about how we get past this design and decor being the first conversation that we have, and why is this left to the end with our 10% in budget,
mm.
right? And have this conversation early on, because it really has to have, the uniqueness, yes, but it has to have the emotional intention. And without that, it becomes a novelty with no longevity,
Yeah.
really, is kind of how I see that. So I think there's this tension too, right? There's this tension out there about this, and isn't beautiful versus unique. It's about aesthetic versus identity. And so that's just one of those things that, is important to kind of, I guess, clarify in how I feel about that. As far as Menizei goes and entrepreneur, and if I were consulting, I think that what is so important is to make sure that you are choosing between, your where Menizei is a category that's so strong that it's its own ecosystem,
Mm.
right? It has become its own
Like
ecosystem.
that?
Yes. And that is long game positioning, right? That's long game positioning. If you were to compare that to a beautiful property in San Diego on the beach, which is great, right? While it's amazing, it's also just another well-designed vacation property that sits on the beach. And so while it is gorgeous and wonderful and will fit the need for many travelers out there, you're really only competing on price and photography
Mm,
at that point.
mm.
As far as when you look at like differentiation. So if it becomes, however, a category within the coastal space that is wellness forward, or maybe it's culturally anchored, then you're building
Preach,
equity.
Paula.
What'd you say?
I said preach.
Then you're building equity, right? You are really diving deep into an emotional connection, emotional intention, purposeful design, into immersing guests and travelers into a space that, I always kind of laugh and say, we don't want to hit them over the head with anything, whether it's design or any element. It's like you're drinking the Kool-Aid and you don't even know why, but you have to have it.
Mm, mm.
It's like subtle, it's beautiful, but it doesn't have to hit you over the head. And that's less is more. And that,
But it resonates.
but it's emotional resonance. Exactly.
Do you
Exactly.
think do you think, Paula, that you can build Menizei, right? Uh, You built an identity, you built a brand, right? You built the actual physical, structures. The land obviously plays a huge component in all of this. The environment, right? In some respects, I'd imagine it's easier to build identity from the ground up. Do you think, Paula, that you can build identity in a more traditional asset, right? I bought this home in San Diego. I
Mhm.
bought it as an investment property, but I want to inject soul into it, or I want to discover the soul it already has. Can you build identity around something that already exists and maybe exists in, for lack of a better term, a more traditional format?
I do believe that. And I believe we just spoke about this at the Las Vegas event. And I do believe that. And I believe that if you really start to adopt that mindset, that identity has to be the first level of conversation versus, the patterns and pillows and this kind of default that people go to. You start to peel back the onion and really understand the soul of and the integrity of what you're working with. Casa Tierra is actually, even though it became this luxury modern hacienda destination, uh, it was, a home in 1950s was originally built. We could have just taken that down to the studs, and a lot of things were a little sketchy and very quirky. I am a big proponent of embracing the quirkiness of something, because that is what allows you to tell a story, and that's the culture that needs to remain. And so I believe that it's hard work, and you need to dive in and understand the location, the culture, and the community. And when you do that, yes, that's when you discover that soul, and then start to create that emotional blueprint around it.
Janice, I want to bring you in here because I think we all resonate with everything you're saying, Paula. I think a lot of our listeners, they listen to the show because they also resonate with these ideals. I think
Mhm.
one of the things that's really difficult is how do you marry this sort of design led approach, this identity led approach when it comes to developing these hospitality concepts, and how do you ground that in real business, right? In real data, right? In real numbers that make sense, right? I think people get excited about these things. Not everybody, but a lot of people want to design a place with soul. And then it becomes how do you justify this to either your investors or your partner if this is like a collaborative effort? And Janice, you've spent a lot of time in your various careers looking at data. You're working at one of the best AI companies, leading AI companies in the space right now. I want your thoughts on how do you reconcile efficiency and the need to show measurable results, right, from these investments to have true ROI. Like, how do you wrestle with these ideals Paula is suggesting that we pursue, which I again agree with just the nuts and bolts of what it takes to operate a business?
Great question. Yeah, I first of all, thank you for touting my tech creds. I am not a Luddite. I am a fan of data. I will say though that I am not I am emphatic actually that data driven design is not the way. Um, I think there's something inherently reactive about using data as your basis for design. I mean, if you think about it, right, you're using inputs that have already been generated and produced, sometimes regurgitated by others. And I think Menizei is a solid example of how you can use other frameworks and still generate the same ROI, if not more improved ROI. I think if I had used data right to just design Menizei, I would have white canvas tents. I would have an ensuite bathroom. I would have the operational headache of a hot tub. And I think, I don't know, Zach, if you remember, there was an episode by Nick and Connor where I think Connor brought a lot of data. It was an awesome episode, but Connor had brought data from, I believe it was Sage Outdoor Hospitality,
Oh, yes, yes.
and uh, there's something along the lines of like, if you, and I'm probably horribly misquoting this, but something along the lines of, if you didn't have an ensuite bathroom, you weren't going to breach the 300 ADR threshold.
Mhm.
And if you didn't have, I think there was F&B was the next
Mhm.
threshold. Like if you didn't have on-site F&B, you wouldn't break the 500 ADR barrier. And, Menazai right now this year is sitting at an 833 average spend per night, and our ADR is sitting right around 676. And we have neither of those. Uh, and so I think there's data becomes a constraint, right?
Mm.
And I'm not against using data um, tactically, right? Paul and I call them algo amenities, right? But I would never use data to define the strategic layer. And I think
Mm.
once you have that category, once you have that identity well defined, then you figure out the amenities, right? That further express, right, that category or that identity that you've created. And then because you have that category, because you have that identity, you're able to reimagine what those amenities look like.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think there is more and more. It's without question an issue, right? For especially for institutional investors. Institutional investors, they love comps, right? Angel investors, they're all about this because they
Yeah.
understand, right, the asymmetrical upside, right? The returns that are possible when you have that category one of one. But for institutional investors, right, it takes some handholding, it takes a lot of education. And I think that, as more and more projects invest, right, in category and invest in identity, there's more and more math that's making the institutional investors realize that you don't have to churn and burn, that you can
Yeah.
take the time and make the right investments.
I mean, and just to back up what you're saying with some, additional data and some maybe a little story too. The number of folks I've had on this show who have consulted a tool, which is an amazing tool, like AirDNA, and found that their comps are $40 a night, right? And they are planning something that's 10x that, maybe 5x that, right? If they were to go off of the data in that instance, the project would never go to never have come to life. And there's countless stories of folks, again, that I know that have built projects that have seen outsized returns because they built one of one experiences, even though the data told them at least some data told them, that something like that would not work here or there, right? And so I think the magic becomes, how do you build a category, right? How many categories can you act? How many categories are feasible to build, right? Can you scale a category? And and then what type of investor or what type of individual do you need to be to go build something like this? Because it's not, at least today, something that I think can scale dramatically. Or at least we haven't seen it. The best examples of things that have scaled a little bit, right, in this kind of experiential space and had exits to maybe like a Marriott type flag, right? The product is suffering dramatically. I'm using Getaway here now, Postcard Cabins, as an example of this, right? Like, they were sort of these novel glamping, design forward structures at the time. They were super trendy. Like, it's what all my friends wanted to go do, is like go check out Getaway. They were ridiculously priced when they first, came out, and now the asset is dramatically struggling after the sale to Marriott Bonvoy. Anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent here, but the point I'm trying to make, Janice, is I totally agree with you that it's important to consider the data, but if you make decisions in this particular space purely based on the data, you'll probably make most of the wrong decisions. And I think that that's worth just sitting with, right? I uh I,
Absolutely.
I want to go to you,
Absolutely.
Paula, here, because you collaborated with Bobby Berk, who's probably best known for being on Queer Eye. I haven't seen the show, but I've heard so many amazing things about both the show and Bobby. And you
Mhm.
guys built, and really brought, the soul of Casa Tierra to life.
Mhm.
What I want to understand from your perspective is, what are some of the things that Janice was just talking about that make sense
Mhm.
and resonate with projects like Casa Tiara? And then where are there differences? Because there are differences, right? When you're working in a
Yeah.
market or with an asset that already exists, right? That isn't,
Mhm.
a forced cocooning experience. So what about what Janice said resonates for your projects, and then where might there be some nuances?
Yeah, it all resonates. And I think, when you think about identity first, right? And that starting point is why that's so important. It really does lay the foundation for all of those other, elements that will come into play. And I think that there's always that push pull with, working when you're talking and working with, whether it's property management companies or an investor, about starting there. It's just having, we have to change the conversation around that in a big way. So I think some of the nuances with Casa Tierra, for example, was we really dove into, the like kind of getting back into that culture, getting back into that story. Who were the previous owners? There's some great things around that takes too long to get into, but we literally, through a social media post, Bobby ended up connecting with the original owner, which ended up, and it happened to be a little closer to install, but it ended up opening this whole, visual things that they shared that we were able to then almost infuse into the project as well. But I think if your question more toward, the identity and starting there, am I right? Or are you kind of, is that kind of where your question was
Exactly, right.
going?
So yeah, so
Okay.
you have the same desire, right,
Yeah,
to give, to do right by the place, right, to give it a
exactly.
story, to give it a soul, to discover the story, or discover the soul. But
Yeah.
then when it comes to actually operationalizing it, right, whether it be thinking
Hmm.
through where you should do something like this, again, assuming that we're not doing, something like Menizei because it doesn't pencil for us, or it's just not what we're interested in, right? We're much more interested in, like, building some really cool space on the San Diego coast, right? So,
Right.
how do you wrestle with that, and help folks kind of think through, from a framework perspective, how to
Hmm.
start?
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to that conversation with how what are those first things that you talk about, and let's don't make it the design conversation, right? I think, in how do you start in creating that kind of emotional blueprint that will lead you into actually making it, guest ready for somebody to walk in is, what is the vision behind, what is the vision? How do we want people, especially if you're an investor, what do you want this to feel like? What, at the end of the day, what do you want people to feel when they arrive, but when they leave? So almost working backwards in that place. And to be able to do that, we really have to dive into all of those nuances that, where the property started in culture. I am a big fan of understanding location, because location drives everything, as we know. You wouldn't be talking about wine, Napa wine, if you're in Nashville, right? So, yes, there's ways that you can do storytelling, and you can, and then it gets almost into the over designing piece of it. But what you want is to be able to connect with somebody emotionally at the level, and I believe community, culture, and location really speak to that. An example of that is at Casa Tierra, for example, on the design piece, I wanted to have a statement when you enter into the property, and lighting is a great way to create that statement. But I wanted it to not just be, oh my gosh, I think I've seen those. And, that's great. You put 14 of them on the ceiling, and that's beautiful. The story is so much deeper than that. So I ended up collaborating with someone in Tunisia, is where these things were fabricated and made. And a very long story short is that by us being able to infuse these handcrafted, beautiful woven lighting fixtures into this space, we ended up feeding an entire village in Tunisia. And
Wow.
so that is that next level storytelling. That doesn't mean that type of thing has to happen with every project, but we told that story through a way very subtle in the property when you go in that room with the little frame that kind of tapped into that. So, I think from that perspective, that really, those types of things start to get into building the new identity too. So we're kind of working from where did this property start? It used to be called the Space Ranch, and now it's Casa Tierra. And so what we're finding, not only with guests checking in and really feeling immersed into the space, also for events, and we can kind of get into that, of course, later. But what we're seeing are all of these brand activations and different types of, whether it's, a fashion company or a golf company, a Travis Matthews, or somebody that wants to come in and be able to also tell their fashion story in a place that, is highly immersive.
Zach, can I piggyback on this real quick?
Please,
Because
please.
I recently I have a client currently in Idaho, and they have a gorgeous A-frame, and they were incredulous. They were like, there are a gazillion A-frames. How in the hell are we going to create a category of one? And it's a fair question. And I think I completely agree with Paula. You take the raw material that you have, which is typically location, but you also, there's a lot of different arenas, right, for inspiration. And for this particular client, they were all in on the longevity movement.
Mm.
And specifically, they were all in. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Comfort Crisis.
I've heard of it, not read it though. It's on
But
my list on Audible, but no. Yeah.
yeah. But this book is all about like going to the furthest extent possible, right, to challenge your physical capacity. And that's what they lived and breathed. And I said, why don't you create a category of one, an A-frame that challenges the guest the moment that they arrive? And so everything that we've designed for this A-frame, from the entry to when you open, there is this at the back of the wall, there is a climbing wall.
Mm.
That is the feature of the A-frame. And so they are the only A-frame that is the longevity A-frame. So, you take from the place, right? You take from the owners, you take from collections, you take from cultural inspiration, and you blend all of these things together, right? To figure out what is that unique place that this destination can have in the world. And Paul and I are currently contemplating working with a client that has 600 condos on the Gulf Port of Mississippi. And
Back
if
to the
ever
Jeez.
there was a challenge of category, that
Jeez.
is it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
lots of opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
Mhm.
no, finish. Yeah, finish your thought, Janice. Sorry.
no. I was just going to say that if you take the time and you do the research and you take from those raw materials, you take from the founders, you can find that category of one.
Yeah.
I what's coming to mind are really two things, and I want both of you to give feedback on this. Paul, your example of the light fixtures, right,
Hmm.
and the story that exists behind them, and then Janice, your example of branding essentially an A-frame as the longevity A-frame and doing everything to evoke the kind of experience that consumer who likes to challenge him or herself wants is another great example of this. So much of these, so many, I should say, of these new hospitality concepts and assets are rooted in story. Their stories are being told on social. There's a lot of time and energy and money spent on not just the design of the experience of the physical experience, but the design of the digital experience, right? Like, what is this brand going to feel like? What should our reels look like, right?
Hmm.
Are we going the influencer route? Are we not? And I think Paula, you I think hinted at this idea
Hmm.
of return on design being being a core ethos of yours, which I think is wonderful framing. And the way that I think about that is, you know, think about how many people are going to take a photo and or do a reel on the story of those light fixtures, right? You could math out if you really wanted to number crunch how many
Hmm.
people saw content that
Yeah.
had anything to do with those light fixtures, right? The
Right.
reach it had, right? How many and you could model how many bookings even were generated because somebody first discovered the property through this cool story. And all of a sudden, what might have looked like insane, I don't know how expensive it was, but a big upfront investment
Hmm.
all of a sudden looks like the smartest investment you could have made for light fixtures in this home, right? And I think
Yeah.
Janice, you're same thing with the climbing wall experience, right? Like, who's seen a climbing wall in an A-frame? No one, right? That
Yeah.
thing is going to get photographed. It's going to get talked about, right? And it's going to naturally attract that kind of consumer that is interested in that sort of experience. And so my question for both of you is, how do you think about translating the physical into the digital? Like, are you working with clients and your partners to help them understand how to tell the stories of their places in non-physical formats, because that has become an increasingly important part of any of these businesses, right? Is how well are you able to help others tell your story and or tell your story yourself? And there are countless examples of the build in public movement, right? And people that have built these experiences and documented everything along the way, and they have 100% bookings when they open their calendar at launch, right? There are examples of that. And then there are these other examples, of folks who stayed very, very quiet until it was done. And then they started talking about it and it almost went viral
Hmm.
overnight. So this is a long question, but basically what I want to get a sense for is, how do you apply these same philosophies to the digital communication, the digital experience of the brand? Maybe we'll start with you first, Janice.
Yeah, in my opinion, when you deploy our framework, you walk away with the narrative that will control and inspire your digital footprint. When you're going through and you're thinking critically about what is your category, when you're going and you're thinking about what is the emotional blueprint, this identity, what is this category meant to evoke in guests? And then you're thinking about, guest journey and choreography. I mean, when you take the time to do that on the front end, you don't have to do a retrofit for
Mm.
social media. You've already got that framework of what your destination represents. It's already laid out before you even start the build, or if it's a renovation project, right, before you start the redesign.
Paula,
Yeah.
would you add anything to that?
Yes, and Janice and I have talked about this so much, and this is just there's so much synergy here. I think sparking curiosity is something I talk about a lot. And also this idea of taking a guest and really looking, when you're designing for a luxury vacation property like a Menizei, or whether it's a San Diego property on the coast, you have to look through these different lenses. You're looking through the design lens, the owner investor lens, the host lens, the um, all of these things at one time. And there's got to be that perfect blend of design with operational efficiency. At the heart and the core of this is the guest, and that idea of let's allow, and what I'm seeing and I'm excited to see is how guests are taken on a journey of exploration at
Mm.
these properties, right? We talk a lot about wayfinding, and wayfinding, you can say, oh, well, that's just putting a sign, you're putting a sign up because the sauna is over here. You know, that's so not the case. And wayfinding is so much more than that. But wayfinding done the right way, that's what that does. It's those subtle cues that allow the guests to be curious, right? Have their own experience within an immersive experience. And so using wayfinding in ways that help take that guest on a journey of exploration is so important. That choreographed experience that we think about, what are they going to feel when they wake up? What's the sense of arrival? What's the sense of departure? We talked a lot in the last few years about Instagrammable moments. And while we could break it down to something that's simple, designing for Instagram, is not really just designing for memory, right? So a pretty corner is great, and that will be an awesome moment, and that who knows what happens. It could go viral, but a pretty corner doesn't build loyalty,
Mm.
right? Doesn't build
Mm.
guest loyalty. An immersive environment does. And so I think these conversations and these ideas with investors about, we have to think about identity. Identity comes first, the branding part. And a piece that I'm so passionate about and talk a lot about is branded destination design, right? And branding is so much more than a sign and, pickleball sign or court that has the name on it. Branding is this holistic effort, like Janice said, this choreography that has to play together, but also you don't even know quite why it's so amazing. You just know you want to be a part of the story. And so I think that these things that we discover along the way, like in what she was saying, through the process and the culture and the location, we start to be able to see the view change from starting with a design conversation and let's start treating design, as a line item. The problem is treating design as a line item instead of an asset class is kind of where I'm getting to with that. And let's not look at this at the end. Let's look at this at the beginning and let it drive all of these things. And then, inherently you'll have your digital blueprint and all those stories to tell, I
I
think.
think just to piggyback and bring it back to your question, Zach, it's similar, right? It's like you can have Instagram driven design and it is shallow and there's no
Mhm.
durability there. But if you have these moments of curiosity, like Paula was talking about, right? And you have this guest choreography that is irrespective, right, of what Instagram is doing. Ultimately, that is what resonates, right? That is what people are going to capture. That's what folks are going to talk about. And that will ultimately translate to socials without being prescriptive about it. I will say Menizei is the worst property on the planet to photograph. I mean, you cannot even capture it in a photograph. Like video is the only way.
Yeah.
And if I had thought about, hey, what's going to make for a great portrait, photo for Instagram? I mean, it would look very, very different.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something else, Zach. Oh, something
Please,
I
no,
was just
please.
thinking about that I talk about a lot, and it's a great way to really think about that design meeting all the other important components is anticipatory design. So it's really about anticipating those guest needs and all the things that we've talked about ahead of time. So you're removing friction. You're removing all of those things up front, right? You've thought through that. And I think that's really what we're seeing, those conversations happening finally a little earlier in the process.
I was talking to a pretty at least renowned to me hotelier recently who has spent his career working at some of the top brands that we all know in various executive positions. Now he's got some of his own projects that he's working on. He's also he's a in his I think mid 70s, but an incredibly astute gentleman. He knows more about AI than I think most 20 somethings do. He's a Harvard business grad. I mean, he's an exceptional human, very very smart. I was having a chat with him, and one of the things he said to me, which still resonates, and I think just reinforces everything that you all are saying today, is that his prediction is that in the next 10 years we're not going to have 40 hotel brands, we're going to have 400, and then we'll have 4,000. And the way that he was thinking about this, right, in particular, is that the distribution leverage, the economies of scale that AI presents to investors, to creators, to visionaries today, right, will enable folks to build these experiences, to build these one of ones, to figure out how to finance these novel destinations in unprecedented fashion. Again, this is his opinion, and I think what I find so encouraging about at least that perspective is that I think there is this temptation to think, well, there are so many of these cool places already, on Instagram, on Airbnb. Like, how am I going to do something like this, right? Or how am I going to compete with the longevity A-frame, right? I can't do
Mhm.
that, right? And I think the narrative that we should be asking is like, well, if we believe that fundamentally it's going to be easier to reach consumers, there's going to be more distribution leverage, there's just going to be more overall leverage in the next decade. What is the thing that you're really passionate about? What do you love? Because chances are you're not the only person that loves that. And if you're in
Yeah.
the vacation rental category, right, you're not trying to fill 150 rooms every night. You're trying to fill one, right? Right. Maybe
Hmm.
three, right? And,
Hmm.
and so, like,
Hmm.
I think like this idea of like needing to figure out, hey, the occupancy needs of a 125 key hotel are just vastly different than the occupancy needs of one of your respective projects. And I think that framing, or that perspective, if we believe that there's at least some reality to that perspective, it should be a really encouraging one,
Mhm.
right? It should be the greatest opportunity that maybe this space, the hospitality sector more generally, has seen in decades, if not if not ever. So I guess
Yeah.
to help round us out here, and close out this conversation, we could talk for forever. I'd love each of your reaction to that, and then I know that we've got some fun stuff that we want to share before we close off about how folks who are listening to this conversation might further engage with you both. And so we'll get to that in a second. But I guess generally speaking, what do you think about what I just shared, and or just any other musings on kind of where we're at in this moment in hospitality and what's exciting to you both respectively? We'll start with you, Janice.
I've thought about like what would I share with the next generation of destination builders, right? And I don't know. I don't know. I am a huge believer in the AI apocalypse, and I think at this moment, um, the most salient, durable currency is creativity.
Mhm.
Anything that is data driven, right? You are already redundant. But that is because as of today, right, LLMs are not yet capable of Genesis. But how much longer that lasts? Not sure. So I think, working on the forefront of agentic workflows and experiences, it's it's a bit scary, right? I mean, we're about to lose the concept of shared experience, right? My browsing experience, which will be integrated with prompts and my own inputs, will look vastly different than I mean, we could go to the exact same website, right? And what is generated for me will be vastly different than what is generated for you. We won't even see the same movie, right? My prompt, I'll be Princess Leia in like a, I don't know, apocalyptic Star Wars and and my music, right? It'll be some weird mesh of like Ella Fitzgerald and Dirty South rap. Like shared experience, right, is going to become exceptionally scarce. So I think for the immediate near term, right, I am definitely thinking about, I think Zach, we've talked about my latest project, which is Charlie Pride Hotel. Charlie Pride is a yeah, just a pioneer in country music, and this hotel is situated right kind of at the foot of the Blues Highway. And
Mhm.
it's kind of polar opposite to Menizei in terms of Menizei is all about couples and the shared intimacy. And when I look ahead and I look at the AI apocalypse, I think what's going to be the new luxury is shared experience. And so when I'm looking at the Charlie Pride Hotel, I'm like, okay, when people enter this hotel, what's that shared experience that they're going to have? Are we going to do jam sessions? Are we going to do listening rooms? So I think that's where my head is at right now, and that's probably because of the project. But I'm really thinking about luxury being defined by shared experiences, and how can you bring that to a destination?
Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
so much I could say there, but and I'm wrong, but that was amazing. Paul, let's go to you.
Yeah.
What do you think about anything Janice said? I said just your own musings as you think about the near to medium term future in the space.
Yeah, obviously agree wholeheartedly. I mean, she has this vast experience with, her agentic work and everything, and I agree with that. The one thing, AI can design a room. AI can. It's amazing what AI can do. I use it every day, not to design, but we all are using this in our as a tool in so many different ways. Um, it can't design conviction, you know.
Mm, mm,
And so
mm.
I look at those types of things, and back to your creativity point, Janice. It can go so far and help support those things, but I think going forward, education is really where I am spending. Obviously, with our workshop, coming up as well, is where I'm spending a lot of time and effort in this next stage of even my business, but working with brands, working with other companies in and around this space and hospitality partners. And the more we can educate about this, because while it's catching on and the idea of a category of one and identity and being so important, and not always leading with just the data and how that will come around, it has to be, this education just has to continue at a very big level. I feel like education is just so incredibly important, and I'm really working on this next level. I mentioned our refresh of our brand and this everything going on with wellness, and wellness is a huge infusion in what's happening. We have to pay a lot of attention to how that is going to enter into the conversation. It's already in the conversation, but working with investors and just really, average is no longer going to work. Average is no longer going to work. We have to dive deeper. We have to get away from these investment conversations being, 10%. Okay, we've got 10% left. Let's figure out how we're going to work on this property. We've done
Yeah.
everything here. That has to start at the beginning, and that really is where that return on design conversation needs to start. And I think it's just going to take some time. And I think education is probably top and forefront of my mind.
And I want to talk about this education that you guys are doing and get all the details on this upcoming workshop. I want to encourage everyone who's tuning into this conversation today to consider attending it and participating in it to the extent that they're able. Last thing before I hear the details from you guys on this, that I think is like the most exciting thing that at least I spent my time thinking about recently is like, I mean, tech stocks, traditional like SaaS stocks, enterprise stocks, people are freaking out right now, right? And I think rightly
And
so.
should.
And should, right? And I mean, the New York Times of all people on like the Daily, right? Today, their whole episode was on Claude Code, right? And like, and
Mhm.
how it's revolutionizing uh, so much, right? But capital's not going away, and my prediction, and I'm seeing this happen in not in huge waves yet, but I think smart people with resources are going to be looking for more physical experiences to invest in because, quite frankly, no one knows enough about what the future of SaaS is going to
It's
look
going to
like.
be.
It's a
Mhm.
really complicated, scary time to be a capital allocator in the tech lane, quite frankly. And so my prediction is it's an exceptional time to be a hospitality entrepreneur, quite frankly, because I think to your point, Janice, everyone's having that come to Jesus realization and moment of wait a second, oh my gosh, if all of this is
Yeah.
true, if I'm now if my team is now 5 agents and me working on something versus 5 people and me, or maybe it's one other person and 10 agents, I'm going to need human connection at some point, right? It's we're social beings. I think it will be a while before we really like are okay with not interacting with real humans in the flesh. And so all that's a long way of saying
Yeah.
that I hope people that are listening to this conversation understand that we're entering, I think, a golden era of hospitality. And I think
Mhm.
markets and are aligning such that if you have this idea, if you have the passion, I think that the resources will be there. In fact, I know that they are there. And so for a while, there've been these people that write to me that they email, they say, "Hey, I've got this really good idea. Do you know anyone who might want to invest in a project like this?" And it's hard. But what I would say is like 3 years ago, I felt very differently than I do
Mhm.
right now. And I think we are entering this moment where these ideas, not all of them, like, but many of them actually will get funded. And so the resourcing required to produce projects like you all produce, that you all help others produce, I think now is the time, and that should be very, very, very exciting. While a lot of people
Mhm.
are scared in other sectors, as they should be, I think if you're in hospitality, you should be wildly excited for the possibilities that the next decade will have for us.
Concur.
Yeah. Absolutely. The idea of these experiences, and like you said, with everything happening with technology and the opposite of this human connection. I mean, it's just so important, and we're seeing that in ways fold out in these properties, like I mentioned, with activations and brands and retreats and wellness and coming in people that don't even know each other, you know, landing
Yeah.
at a property that can sleep 25, and that's that human connection that's been missing.
Yeah. All right. As we close out, guys, tell us about your workshop. So you have something coming up in about a month or so. Janice, you want to tell us a little bit about the project, and then Paula, I'd love to
Yeah,
hear from you too on anything that Janice misses.
sure.
We're just spreading the gospel of what destination design means. We walk folks through our framework that we use, starting with the foundational concepts of category and identity. And it's a 2-day working session, so we're not able to go from category to these are the pillows that you're going to put on your sofa. But we develop that foundation so that when you do get to that point, you've got your North Star. I think one of the things that's so attractive about data-driven design is it's a security blanket, right? Everybody
Mm,
feels comfortable with it. You can blame something, right? If it goes wrong, you're like, I
True.
just followed the data.
So true.
And I think with creativity, folks are intimidated. Not everyone thinks, well, I don't know anything about materiality, or, it feels like there's a barrier there. And so Paula and I created this framework that allows you to go step by step and shows you how to bring in that creativity to be able to define that category and that identity. So when folks come out of that workshop, they'll have at least those foundational concepts to work from as they're designing their destinations. How'd I do, Paula?
Great. Yeah. Ditto. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Same.
and
There's nothing much to add. Yes, exactly. Perfectly.
And so the best way for folks who want to engage in this framework, who wants to better understand how to digest everything that you guys have learned and are offering is to what? Should we direct them somewhere? Should they DM you? Where do you want to send folks?
We've built a website together called destination.design. We would love to offer your listeners, your viewers, a special offer. Each cohort is intentionally small, but we'll definitely give folks who come from BTS priority review.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. So it's destination.design, and they'll just say, hey, I listened to the pod, and you guys will help give them whatever discount or offer special preferential treatment, of course.
The preferential treatment.
That you're able.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, we're very excited about it. Yeah. We had some great feedback from a last event we were both at when we kind of talked about what was coming, and I think it'll be one of maybe many coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Janice, Paula, thank you both for your time. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the vision that you have for the space. I know it resonated with me, and I'm sure will resonate with those who have listened to this conversation today. Folks who are tuning in, I'll have links to Janice and Paula's respective websites and socials, and their destination.design website below. Just scroll on down to the show notes, find out how to connect with them. And please do connect with them and let them know what you thought of this conversation. It's always helpful when folks get to hear from you all how you thought they did. So, Janice, Paula, thanks for everything.
Thank you, Zach. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hey friends, thanks for joining us for this episode of Behind the Stays. I'd love to know what you thought of the episode. Feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at Behind the Stays, or send me an email at zach@journey.com. If this is your first time tuning in, it's a pleasure to have you, and we hope to have you back again soon. But if you've been a listener for a while, I'd greatly appreciate if you'd subscribe to the show if you aren't already, and then leave us a rating and review of the show wherever you're streaming this podcast. Oh, and if you know a hotelier or a hospitality entrepreneur that's building something new and novel, I invite you to introduce them to me so that my team and I can discuss bringing them on the show. Again, you can just shoot me an email at zach@journey.com or a DM on Instagram. Behind the Scenes is brought to you by Journey, a next-generation loyalty program built for the modern traveler. We're looking to onboard new boutique hotels, unique stays, and the top vacation rental management companies onto our platform every day. If you're a hospitality entrepreneur who has a stay or a collection of stays with soul, we'd love for you to apply to join our alliance at journey.com/alliance. Again, that's journey.com/alliance. Thanks for being here, y'all. We will see you next time.